Jim the Ape wake up, see bullshit. Jim the Ape start to rant. Jim the Ape hears disagreements from stupid humans who can't. They say Jim the Ape very oppressive and his ideas suck. His arguments are problematic, but he don't give a fuck. Jim the Ape think maybe feminists wanna grow up and get over themselves. Jim the Ape will say it out loud. Jim the Ape's an asshole and proud. Jim the Ape hates stupid. Jim the Ape hate SJWs. Jim the Ape very simple ape with big normal and working brain. Jim the Ape want proof. Jim the Ape want proof. Hello again, humans. It is I, Jim the Ape, and I continue to be insanely busy, but I am at least trying to balance my schedule so that I can resume making videos on something vaguely resembling a regular basis. I can tell you that I've written quite a few videos in the past week, most of which are collaborations, so we'll see how those pan out. Anyway, today's subject was brought to my attention by the first YouTuber I made a collaboration with, Peach Bailey. Not that she sent it to me directly or anything, she just made a response to it, and I kept pausing for my own commentary, which means I have a lot to say about it. So, without further ado, let's do this.
Hey, so some of you may have noticed that our good friend Brad, me, who has featured in far too many of my videos at this point, is a tad problematic.
Well, I hope nobody's playing feminist buzzword bingo, because that right there would have been a shot, and we're only 9 seconds into your video. So yeah, you're talking about a character that you portray in your videos as a representation of something you're arguing against. You may have noticed I don't do that in my videos. I did it like once for 2 seconds in my first video, and even that was kind of a mini tangent. But the reason I don't do it is because it's far too easy to turn such a character into a straw man, which, for those of you playing at home, means a misrepresentation of your opponent's argument. So I try to represent my opponent's arguments as accurately as possible, trying not to make too many mental shortcuts or assumptions about what someone thinks, and instead simply play their video and respond directly to what they say and how they say it. Oh yeah, let's get back to that, shall we?
You see me, I'm not problematic. What are your thoughts on feminism? I'm not a feminist. I believe in equal rights.
You know, this Brad guy has a point. I mean, just look at how feminists react to the mere concept of having a discussion about men's rights issues.
How do you sleep at night, man? You fuckers.
So you believe it's hate speech, right?
It is hate speech.
I've never heard him before. I don't even know what he's talking. I've never heard of them before.
We invite you to educate yourself.
So I just wanted to listen to him.
Go on Google.
I just wanted to see who this guy is and what he's talking about. But now I can't get in.
You should be fucking ashamed of yourself. You're fucking scum. You are fucking scum. Fucking rape apologist, incest supporting, woman hating, fucking scum.
Is there someone else I can wait? Does she want to follow me?
Fucking scum. Yeah, just another.
I just want to listen to someone else's opinion. I'm not even on a side here. I just listen to as many people as I can.
You know what though? Why would you pay money to fucking support a fucking rape apologist if you weren't fucking one?
I've never heard him say anything that was.
Well, it's fucking scum.
You have a ticket?
Yeah, you should be fucking proud of yourself. These are the fucking men that are going to rape your sisters and the women in your life. You should be fucking ashamed.
Does that seem like equality to you?
Let's just look up the definition of feminism.
Oh great, more dick sucking. Look, The dictionary isn't the Bible. It's shit at defining movements and ideologies because it doesn't document the actions of the people behind them. Get new fucking arguments. Skip.
There you go. Equality. Not women being better than men or ignoring men's issues.
Just insisting that the only valid way to achieve gender equality is a movement that starts with a gendered prefix. And what do you know? It's a female one. Oh, and they don't ignore men's issues. They just pay them lip service at best or fucking vehemently and aggressively protest any gathering meant to address them at worst. Because, you know, equality.
Feminists, don't you mean feminazis?
I'll tell you what I told Onion Cunt in my guest video for Andy Worski's channel. Feminazis are just extreme feminists. Nothing changes about the beliefs or the rhetoric. Only the actions become more zealous. Also, there are parallels to be made, what with all the propaganda extolling its virtues, despite the actions of its supporters not being so great. Fuck you, Godwin, I went there.
Did you seriously just compare aggressive equal rights activists to literal genocidal fascists?
Well, the National Socialist Party did want equal rights for the master race. They just weren't too keen on the rights for the Jews. And now I can't stop drawing parallels in my mind between the two groups.
Sure, there are some feminists who push it too far and seem to hate men.
She said, using big sarcastic air quotes around the word feminists. Do you remember the kill all men hashtag? Do you remember which political ideology that hashtag came from?
But they're not really feminists.
Oh aye, the no true Scotsman fallacy that is. You've committed a very common fallacy, milady. Just because a member of your group does something you don't like doesn't make them not a member of your group. That is the only time you will ever hear me say the word milady, I promise.
They're misandrous. People who think women are actually better than men, which is obviously just as wrong as thinking men are better than women.
I always feel like feminists are missing the point when they talk about not thinking women are better than men, because it just feels like the wrong way to put it. Anyway, I'm glad that you at least acknowledge misandry as a thing. But you see, there's this thing going around in feminist circles where they take the idea of a definition as an argument, like you did before, and they say that the definition of sexism or racism is something along the lines of prejudice plus power. Never mind the fact that no legitimately objective definition has ever said anything like that. They say that only white people can be racist, and only men can be sexist, because they assert that the current system in place gives institutional backing to those particular kinds of prejudices, which therefore upgrades them to racism and sexism respectively. It's blatantly fucking obvious why they do this. It's so that they can be as racist or sexist against white men as they like and be immune to the accusations of being so by their own biased definitions.
Also, remember the suffragettes?
Funny that you said suffragettes and not suffragists. You could have used the general term, meaning an advocate for the equal right to vote for all people, but no, you went with the name of the militant groups that were associated with, among other things, arson, property damage, and domestic terrorism. Now, I'm no historian, and I haven't read up on all of this, but it seems oddly familiar that there's a general, unbiased term for an equal rights advocate, i.e. egalitarian, and then there's a corresponding militant group that insists that one group is being victimized and oppressed and must therefore violently retaliate against their oppressors, i.e. feminism or Black Lives Matter. It really is true what they say that history repeats itself.
They were some of the first memorable feminists, but they did a lot of things people disapproved of too.
I think I've already made my point, but basically doing things people disapprove of doesn't inherently make you right. And just because the suffragettes were like prototype feminists doesn't make feminism a good thing either, because the suffragettes weren't a good thing. They were assholes who took a noble goal, equal voting rights, and twisted it into violently depraved insanity. And guess what? They probably thought they were victims too.
Arson, chaining themselves to buildings, hunger strikes.
Well, I'm fine with those last two for the most part. If people want to starve themselves to death or physically restrain themselves over such nonsense, I don't really care. But that first one is a fucking felony, and for good reason. Your argument is practically defeating itself at this point. Let's see what else you got.
Does that mean that what they were fighting for, a vote for women, was wrong?
No, but actions speak louder than words. And sometimes your actions are saying, I'm a violent asshole, while your words are saying, I'm an activist who stands for equal rights for women. Guess which one's more accurate in that case?
Don't let the methods of a few put you off the cause.
But the actions of one fucking person who wasn't an MRA is enough justification for some to dismiss the men's rights movement as a group of misogynistic virgins who can't get laid and therefore blame all women for their own personal shortcomings. You know what would be nice? If people got their heads out of their asses and stopped cutting skin off of newborn babies if and only if they have a penis.
What about men's rights? A lot of feminists care about men's rights too.
But usually, when they bring it up, it's just, oh, men should be able to cry more and show their emotions. Meanwhile, most men do show their emotions when and where it's appropriate. They just aren't crippled by them. And you know what emotion I experience the most in life? Fucking pissed off! And throughout my YouTube career so far, I've become pretty damn good at expressing that.
The whole thing is about gender equality and women being equal to men in all areas of life. Perhaps if men's rights activists would work with feminists to make the world better for everyone, that might be more productive.
Hey, if you want to get together with a bunch of your feminist friends and join me and or other self-identified men's rights advocates to go protest infant circumcision, I'm down. If you want to petition the government to abolish selective service and or to fix any gender biases there are in rape laws, custody laws, or divorce proceedings, I'll sign the dotted line. If you want to push for stricter penalties cracking down on deliberate and malicious false rape accusations, I'm right there with you. I don't have to agree with you on everything to get on board with a specific cause if I agree with said cause. If anything, it's usually feminists that dismiss men's rights advocates as misogynists rather than work with them or even hear them out.
Rather than all this pointless infighting when we really all want the same thing.
In theory, yes, but in practice, no. There's also something to be said about the way each group goes about trying to achieve their allegedly common goal. But this video's dragging enough already, so let's just move on.
Also, this may not be completely accurate, but I think the societal pressures on men are so linked to women's issues that it's quite hard to separate them. For example, the idea that men shouldn't cry and should be tough all the time.
Called it.
Could be linked to the idea that men should be afraid of expressing their emotion in a way that is linked to femininity and therefore weakness.
Or, you know, it could be that men have historically had to be physically strong to protect women and children so that your species could survive, which led men to developing emotional strength as well, essentially learning to contain their emotions and face adversity without breaking down into the kind of blubbering mess that Natalie Imbruglia described herself as in the song Torn. And it could be that this behavioral trend has reached back through the evolutionary timeline, back to earlier primates, like our common ancestors, and perhaps even further to much earlier sexually reproductive and sexually dimorphic species with tribal or pack-like behavior. But what do I know? I'm just a stupid talking gorilla. My patriarchy.
So if we stop associating femininity with weakness...
We only do that because men are physically stronger on average, and at the extremes. But feminists don't want to accept that fact because it triggers them.
Then men could act in a way that's considered more feminine without judgment.
People are going to judge you no matter what you do or say. Get the fuck over it.
Not all men. I don't disrespect women. I don't think any rational feminist condemns all men as woman haters.
Oh really? Because I know a feminist who disagrees.
All white people are racist, all men are misogynistic, all cisgender people are transphobic, all members of a majority are biased against the members of the minority.
But all men do have privilege due to their gender, and you can't deny that.
Well, I could, but it would be more in the sense that it's not an exclusive thing. See, the way I look at it, it's like creating a character in an MMO, or any video game where there are different types of characters under different classifications. For example, in a swords and sorcery type game, there will probably be knights, archers, mages, healers, necromancers, etc. And when you create your character, you pick which one you want to be, and it gives you different abilities and perks based on which one you chose, which preferably fits your playstyle well and helps you level up faster. Life is like the ultimate MMORPG, where your character is pretty much randomly generated for you, and there are no respawns or reloading your last save. I draw this analogy to say that what you call an exclusive privilege, and then proceed to leave undefined, is something that in all reality is just a perk related to an arbitrary characteristic. And just like with the character types, there are ups and downs to each race and both genders. I know, triggered. But the bottom line is, you take the good with the bad, just like everybody else.
It's highly unlikely that a man will be denied a job because of his gender, for example.
Unless the company doing the hiring has a diversity quota to meet and therefore has to hire more women. No such quotas exist to benefit men in general, or white men specifically, by the way. And even if a man gets a job over a woman, there are other factors to consider. Maybe he was more qualified. Maybe she was planning on having children and wanted more pay for a long period of no work. You have to look at these things on a case-by-case basis, not just broadly generalize and think you know what the hell you're talking about.
Except in a few female-dominated fields. Men's opinions are often seen as more valid than women's.
Maybe your opinions just suck. You ever think of that?
And in society, it's considered more acceptable for a man to be dominant.
The porn industry kind of disagrees with you there. At least my perception of it does. There's not a whole lot of men physically dominating women. At least not without explicit expressions that she enjoys that kind of thing. Either in the form of your typical shouts of yes or some other affirmative response, or through pre- and post-scene interview segments where they make sure to clarify that it is all consensual and that safe words and vocal safe signals in the event of a ball gag are in place. My main source for this is kink.com. You can search for some of their stuff on Pornhub if you don't believe me. But anyway, I think the reason there's less straight up male domination is because it can come off as a bit rapey, and most people don't like that. So any scenes that come close assure you that it's all above board, while women dominating men, well, let's just say that a female dominatrix is far more common, even being portrayed in some tamer BDSM light type porn. Sorry, that was kind of a tangent, but write about what you know, right?
I don't get it. Where does this privilege come from? Our whole world has been developed mostly by men.
Because they're the ones breaking their backs to fucking build shit!
If you look in the history books, you will see very few female names.
Because that's what's important to a feminist nowadays. Open up a textbook and count the vaginas.
There has been now only 2 female prime ministers of the UK, both of which were white, and there has never been a female president of the United States, though that might change.
I hope Grade A Under A doesn't mind me using a clip of his videos to refute this, but
Well, fucking hell, mate. You don't have a cock or bollocks. You're clearly fit to run my country. What a shit reason to vote for someone. Not because of their good traits or their policies, right? But because of what's not between their fucking legs. It's these fucking feminists, man. I hate them. Listen, I don't get it. Do these feminists look at Obama and think, hey, that black guy got a turn to be president, now it's our turn?
We haven't had a woman to be president yet.
We haven't had a female president yet? Well, shit, Hillary. We haven't had a child president either. Is that a good idea? And how about a dog president after that? Should we do that next? And then a fucking ISIS president after that? Let's just let everyone have a go at being president. After all, what's the worst that could happen? It's not like having someone underqualified to be president can fuck up the entire country or anything like that. Oh, wait! Yes, it can!
Naturally, when a man is running the country, he will make decisions that benefit his gender primarily, whether consciously or not.
Wow. That is an incredibly hateful implication. You're basically saying that all men are automatically sexist and can think of nothing else but making life easier for people with the same genitals as them. And you add the caveat that even if they don't think they have this gendered bias, they still do because it can just be declared as unconscious. And then you don't have to prove it. Fuck that. Not everyone is as obsessed with gender or as collectivist as you are. Most people don't give a flying fuck about gender identity politics, and they aren't automatically fond of anyone who shares the same 23rd base pair of chromosomes with them either. Come to think of it, most bitter rivalries are between two people of the same gender.
Which often leaves women with less say.
Except for the fact that they can vote for whichever candidate they want. Or do you not respect women's democratic choices?
And that's just talking about two of the countries with the most gender equality. Approximately 146 other countries have never had a female leader. So not all men disrespect women, but all men have privilege in our society.
Go around saying that shit to homeless men. I fucking dare you. Not to mention male rape victims that aren't taken seriously, and also male victims of domestic abuse at the hands of female partners, who have literally no shelters to escape their abusers. Yeah, all men have privilege. My fucking ass.
The patriarchy theory. Isn't that just there to punish men for being male? Patriarchy, a system of society.
Oh, fuck off. Tell you what, how about instead of wasting all your time reading pointless definitions, you actually try to come up with some substantive arguments? Or, you know, actually try to do something to help people.
It's not about condemning you for your gender.
You've never experienced oppression in your entire fucking life. Neither have I. You're fucking a white male. You're a white man.
I wish someone could come save me right now from you.
Right, well, nobody has to save you because you're a fucking white man who gets to do whatever he wants to in this space, right? Okay. So I'm saying, no, you do not have permission to walk around videotaping women of color and acting like you can do that and the rest of us can't. Aren't you quite aware by holding that video camera on me that you are surrounded by your privilege, right? Take your privilege somewhere else, please.
Obviously. It's like I just said, men hold the power. That may not be directly your fault, Brad, as a male, but it is probably something you benefit from without realizing it.
And it may not be your fault that women have the power to get men thrown in prison and ruin their lives with a false rape allegation, but it may be something that you benefit from. So why don't you just admit to your female privilege and start calling yourself an MRA? See, it doesn't work when I argue that way, so why the fuck do you expect that kind of bullshit to work on me?
That's why we say down with the patriarchy and not down with all men.
But if you think that there aren't at least some feminists who mean that when they say down with the patriarchy, then obviously you've never heard of the concept of dog whistle politics.
We're not trying to take away all the men and put the women in power. Why would that be a good idea ever?
I don't know. Ask the femitheist. You know, the feminist that wrote an article about what a utopia it would be if only the male population was reduced by 90%, and that those remaining should be used mainly for breeding and slave labor. She seems to think that was a good idea.
But sex Sexism doesn't exist in Western society anymore. We have equal rights.
You remember that thing I was saying earlier about the character becoming a straw man? Yeah, you just did that. People like myself don't argue that sexism doesn't exist anymore. If anything, we say that what you're calling sexism is blown out of proportion and that there's actual sexism that you're ignoring because it's happening to men. And they tend not to complain about it as much as feminists complain about catcalling and other trivial bullshit. Not only that, but I and my peers tend to also argue that we do not have equal rights, and the ones that are lacking are rights that men don't have. Hence, men's rights advocate. Now, how about you start your response to Brad by saying the 2 words that are the most offensive and triggering thing that one can say to a feminist or a social justice warrior?
I disagree. I disagree. I disagree. Society is still beneficial to men, whether that's to do with women being condemned for their sexual activity or lack of it.
You're right. Men are never condemned or mocked due to a lack of sexual activity. Not even once.
Or women being viewed as undesirable when they're old and not worth listening to when they're young.
Men are seen as undesirable when they're short, among other things. And the new self-appointed moral arbiters of the world, known as SJWs, don't consider men to be worth listening to at all. And especially when they're straight, white, and don't suffer from a brain disease called gender dysphoria.
Women being catcalled and abused by men.
Way to disingenuously link catcalling with the vague and ominous charge of abuse. Here's the thing about catcalling. It's just words. Get over it. Ignore them or shout something back. Either way, it's not a big deal if you don't make it one. As for that vague assertion of abuse, be more specific and present evidence next time, because you seem to be making a very serious implication there. But that's all it is. You don't say if it's sexual or physical, as in violence, and you just broadly phrase it as women being abused by men. Well, what the fuck about the equally vague, gender-swapped version of that? Men being abused by women.
I'm not saying men don't suffer from these issues as well, but they do root from a sexism deeply ingrained in our society, where women are the objects of men, or they're there to please men.
Because society views women as mindless sex objects with no agency. That's why it views male-on-female rape the same exact way as it views completely consensual sex, right? Yeah, bullshit. The reason male virgins get made fun of is not because they didn't pick up their sex object from the adult-themed equivalent to Walmart. In fact, some guys even get made fun of for hiring prostitutes because a woman's consent to sex is highly fucking valued and considered the ultimate gauge of a man's worth. Hiring a prostitute is seen as a way of circumventing the task of courting a woman's desire. But it's not necessarily about a high number of consenting partners, because there are men who are hated for sleeping with lots of women and presumably not forming any kind of emotional connection with them. But a man who has earned a woman's consent a grand total of 0 times is heavily mocked and derided for being a worthless loser. Meanwhile, rapists are among the most reviled people on the planet, especially men who rape women. And why is that? Because society at large respects and values women's agency.
I feel like the reason a lot of men think sexism doesn't exist anymore is because it doesn't affect them.
Yep. I totally didn't just refute that claim with the examples I listed earlier in this video. Also, what about the feminists who think that sexism against men doesn't exist? Because it kinda sounds like you're one of them.
At least directly. But it's so important to remember that sexism should be intersectional.
There There are so many ways in which that's funny. It's like you're saying that everyone needs to experience sexism, which is a hilariously bad idea. You could also say that that means you're equating intersectional feminism with sexism. I know it was just a slip of the tongue, and you meant to say feminism should be intersectional, but it's so Freudian, I just have to make fun of it. So tell me, have you ever felt attracted to your father?
And it's not just about Western feminism or white feminism. There are women of racial minority groups, trans women, women in less developed countries.
But you don't care about the men in those countries. Fuck them. They're all privileged patriarchal oppressors, aren't they?
Who have different and often more prominent issues. But doesn't feminism just emphasize the differences between men and women? It, like, divides us?
I'll tell you something, this Brad character is a lot smarter than you think. Feminism doesn't just emphasize the differences between men and women, they're obsessed with those differences. They won't shut the fuck up about them, claiming all men have privilege and that all women are oppressed, all without a single shred of evidence to back up their faith-based claims. Not to mention the fact that they do the same to several other categories of human classification, such as race, sexual orientation, and gender identity, which is basically 99% normal people and 1% sufferers of a genetic disorder. I'm not counting all the attention-seeking Tumblerinas who think their gender is a toaster.
I don't think it emphasizes a difference in us as humans. It's more a difference in social and legal rights.
Okay, well, the legal rights thing I already talked about. Again, men's rights advocate. And there are some doozies that men currently lack in that department. But what strikes me as interesting is all this emphasis on social behavior. One, you're never going to change social behavior completely unless you invent mind control, which is a scary thought. Please don't do that. And two, talking about social equality is what you do when you have no more legal rights to fight for, at least not reasonable ones.
And in fact, I think it should do the opposite of dividing us. It should bring us together. Ah, equality.
Think and should are weasel words. And what they mean here is that feminism does divide people, it's just that you wish it didn't. Well, if wishes were fishes, the world would be Atlantis. So too bad. But just give the climate change a few more years, and we may actually be ruled over by Aquaman. Or Namor, depending if you're a Marvel or a DC person.
Personally, I think it's this bickering over the use of a word or over which issues we should care more about that divides us, not the actual movement itself.
Which issues people should care about more is a substantive argument of sorts. It speaks to priorities, which can be evaluated based on consequences, and how widespread or how frequent the problem in question is. But if you ask me, I'd say the most divisive thing you could do is give a shit what someone's gender, race, or sexual orientation is before you decide whether to dismiss them outright or listen to them and only dismiss them if they disagree with you. Guess what so-called movement is doing that?
Can I be a feminist? I mean, I'm not a woman, so... Of course you can! It seems like a shame to me that men feel like they can't identify with a word just because it seems to be linked to femininity.
And it seems like a shame to me that people feel like they can't just identify as a gender-neutral word for equal rights advocacy that isn't tied to any academic, dogmatic ideology, because someone told them that if they believe in equality, that means they're a feminist. Also, you can scratch what I said about Brad being smart. He's just as much of a fundamentally airheaded thundertard as the person who writes for and portrays him.
We need men in feminism to discuss male issues, but also to help men be better.
Because they're inferior to women? Again, I usually think that assessment is inaccurate the way feminists use it, but I couldn't resist. I don't know, maybe it should be phrased as women are seen as more important, or that their problems are seen as more important. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're almost done, thankfully.
To be aware of their privilege.
Why the fuck aren't you aware of yours? I couldn't help but notice you live in a first world country. That's a good start. You've got clothes on your back. Can't see much other than a bookshelf behind you, but that's cool if you're into books. And that's an awfully nice Stark family sigil necklace you're wearing, which seems like either blasphemy against feminism, because, you know, Sansa Stark rape scene, or blasphemy against Game of Thrones because an uptight PC fucktard should not be watching such a badass television show or reading the books either. I'm not saying you can't, because I don't really care what entertainment you like. I just think it's interesting given the numerous times feminists have complained about all the horrible things that happen to women on the show. Not a peep about all the shit that happened to men, though. Poor Theon. Poor Theon.
And help us to make change. It's important that men don't try and speak over women about female issues.
So in other words, dear men, you can totally be feminists. You just need to sit down and shut the fuck up. Yeah, I'm sure that'll go over well.
But it's equally important that women don't try and speak over men about male issues.
And that's why the men's rights movement exists. But for the most part, we don't care if it's men or women speaking about the issues we talk about. After all, Karen Strawman and Allison Tiemann are very popular, and rightfully so. They're very rational and well-spoken. See, it doesn't matter who is speaking or what their gender is. The ideas and arguments stand or fall on their own merits.
Congratulations, Brad, you're a feminist. Feminism, not just for women. I hope this was informative.
It wasn't. It was, however, full of that oh-so-popular internet slang, though. What is that called again? Oh yeah, cringe.
To you, as well as just Brad. I get that some people are just never going to listen.
Oh, I, for one, always listen. What I don't do, however, is listen and believe. And that's the problem, according to most feminists. Skepticism is streng verboten.
But at least Brad is less problematic now. Be like Brad. Be a male feminist.
How very binary and cis-normative of you to say that.
Please let me know in the comments if anything I've said wasn't quite right. I'm still learning, and I don't think anyone's feminism is perfect. Goodbye.
Well, I'll do you one better. I'll make a response video explaining why you need to go back to the drawing board with the whole fucking thing. Also, very strange that you said your feminism isn't perfect, like it's a religion. Oh, I don't think you're living perfectly for Christ. You need to repent your sins and ask forgiveness. Yeah, feminism is treated pretty much like a religion. But that's the end of the video, obviously. If you're wondering why I got so much material out of her, I just couldn't get through 10 seconds of her speaking without her saying something that I had to address. It was a very difficult and suicidal thought-inducing writing process. I would like to say though, please do not go to this woman's video and harass her or leave mean comments. Honestly, I was mean enough to her in this video, and it seems like her intentions are not bad, at least. She's just a bit misguided, in my opinion. If I do leave the link in the description, it's only so you can see her video unedited and uninterrupted if you want to. Anyway, that's gonna do it for me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. I don't care. Comment below to let me know your thoughts. Subscribe if you haven't already. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter, stalk me on Sea Lion Club, and most importantly, you can support my work on Patreon. Every little bit helps. That's the end of your regularly scheduled dose of shameless self-promotion from me. I'll catch you next time. Stay great, apes.